Good afternoon. It's 5 o'clock on a Tuesday in England, and my guest this week on What Comes Next Live is Kathryn Chapman, photographer with a particular beautiful and powerful angle on portraiture, which she calls face-to-face, which honestly has completely blown me away. And I'll probably ask her at the end of this, is the first time we've met. We will move in some of the same circles in different orbits, but I may well ask her, when can you fit me in and when can I be a client? Because I've been really blown away by it. Our show each week is about what comes next in whatever context the guest wants. My overarching theme is all around leadership. And of course, that always starts with self-knowledge and self-leadership. So that's me perhaps framing things too much. And with that, I will hand over to my guest to say a little bit about herself and to muse on our theme. Good afternoon, Kathryn. Pleasure to have you.
Hi, Tom. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for asking me to do this. It's a real pleasure. So nice to introduce me. Bless you. I'm a photographer, portrait photographer based in Surrey in the UK, and I do work. I take photographs of people for their mental health, for improved mental health and well-being, and I do that through a variety of. I've got two main processes that I use, and I'm actually what next, if I jump straight in there, is I'm about to launch a new product in April. So I have a third product, but my kind of flagship product is face-to-face, what you've mentioned. And I photograph women telling their story in a safe, non-judgmental place. And I use the images as a tool for reflecting back to them all the amazing things that they are, so they can see their strength and resilience and bravery and courage and beauty. And it's a very powerful process, which I devised from my own journey with depression and anxiety. And I spent 25 years in and out of talking therapy, and it didn't really work for me. So I'm still trying to work out why. I don't know. Anyway, I won't try and work that out on this. I decided I wanted to do a self-portrait shoot. I had this idea coming to the end of some therapy. I wanted to photograph myself, look myself in the eye, sit with my most difficult emotions and photograph what was there. And it was an incredibly powerful process that I went through. And I was astonished to find that I didn't hate my images. In fact, I felt really sorry for the woman looking back at me. And it was the start of self-care and self-love and compassion that I'd never had in my entire life. And it was quite extraordinary. But 6 months after that, I was feeling consistently good. I was looking after myself. I could see the pain in these pictures, and I was processing what I was seeing. And I basically, through the images, recovered from lifelong depression and anxiety, and I was quite astonished. And from that, then I thought, oh, is this something I can offer other women? And it went from there, really. And so that's one of the things I do. It's been really successful. I piloted it in 2019, and I had incredible results, much better than I could ever have hoped for. And so it's now basically all I want to do. And on the back of the face-to-face process, I also do something called a freedom shoot. So 6 months, which was from my journey as well. 6 months after my face-to-face shoot, I decided I want to celebrate how great I felt. And so I did another self-portrait, and I'm going to show you an image because I've got them on my wall. So I bought a parachute off the internet and cut a hole in it. Did a really bad job of making it into a frock. And I stood on the side of a windy hill. And that was a self-portrait. I had it under my toe. I was doing the buttons with my
gorgeous. And for later when this goes up as a podcast, because most of our audience are podcasters.
Oh yes, I'm sorry.
No, it's perfect, because on the page on the site for Kathryn Chapman will always be this YouTube conversation. So if they want to look at it, if they want to look at anything visual, because it is quite surreal. One of the things you're talking about is experiencing something through visuals.
Right? I mean, it just does what conversation doesn't. And what it gives you is objectivity, slight objectivity. So those vital inches between what's going on in your head and your screen or your print picture, what you're looking at, it is just enough space to give you objectivity to look at yourself from a perspective, a slightly removed perspective. It's the objectivity that allows you to see yourself as somebody who deserves compassion. And that's very powerful. And for those people who find that really difficult, who struggle with self-love, who hate themselves, basically. I mean, I hated myself, and now I don't, which I still find extraordinary. It's those few inches that make all the difference, and isn't it often the way that the smallest thing can make the biggest difference?
Absolutely. So I've seen on your Instagram, the most visual of social media, the freedom shoots, and I think the face-to-face, and I think some of the freedom shoots, and I think now. What's the new? So you need to tell me now. What's the new offering?
Well, the freedom shoots and of course the face-to-face, they're quite immersive processes. So it's all about getting in touch with how you're feeling and using that in the shoot. And the creative shoots are I kind of step back from that. So it's an opportunity to have a shoot that's very styled and creative and fine arty, but not stepping into the realms of using your emotions and you know, some people I think will find that uncomfortable. So it's a less scary thing, I suppose. It's a less putting yourself out there shoot, and it's a chance to express yourself and have that freedom of expression, but not really going too deep into it. Sorry, that's my dog.
Hello, dog.
I knew that was going to happen.
Well, this is our reality, right? You're different, flexible work. I call it WFA, work from anywhere.
Yes.
What's coming to mind to me was I have 3 sons, and I won't name them, and I won't name the specific one of the 3, but one of the things that their mother used to insist we do every year, which I thought was a bit daft back then because I wasn't really in touch with myself 25 years ago, was the classic annual Christmas family photo shoot.
Yeah.
And one of those kids, as I believe talking to photographers is quite common when they're 1 to 3 years old in particular, wouldn't insert expletive here, smile. Wouldn't look at the camera, wouldn't do any of this. And there is an amazing photographer in the Cayman Islands called Rebecca Davidson, who is now one of the world's top wedding photographers. And she started out when she was much younger. She's roughly the same age as me, so she was doing this in her 20s. And she just had this incredible ability to, not so much the element, it was partly the element of getting the kids' attention and then look at the camera kind of thing, and doing all kinds of daft stuff to get their attention, as you do with like young children on portrait shoots. But it was the fact that she was able to capture not just that one. And if I said how many people were in the picture at that time, you'd be giving away the age of the which one was the troublesome one. But let's say it was a few people. And but you'd look at those and you go, that's so him. So there's something about I'm fascinated by this process you've described, because there's something about the ability to see and the ability to see the subject. And just thinking about Rebecca, she then she really mastered this over years and years of doing putting her time into these generic studio portrait shoots. And then she took them outside because it was a warm climate. And then she got into weddings, and then she came up with, I mean, you know, she was probably one of the very first people to do a concept called Trash the Dress.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Where they do it in warm weather, and they'd literally jump off a dock into the sea in the wedding dress normally the couple will be taken away to do pictures and this kind of thing. And they would just do this. And she did all this incredibly creative stuff. but it was really just all a way to get them to let down the formality and see inside. And there is I had a cousin who got married about 15 years ago, and father, my uncle, was very traditional, and he had an old school film camera, and he was the photographer for the wedding. And we're talking, I don't know, roughly 15 years ago. And early days of, there was digital cameras and phones and stuff, but not proper smartphones with cameras. But I realized he was going through the shot list that people used to do when they had just fused film cameras. I've got to get this shot, this shot, this shot. And I went, I'm going to go out with my decent quality digital SLR, and I'm going to take loads and loads of shots of the audience. And my present to my cousin is going to be all of the candid stuff I managed to capture.
Nice.
And in that, I managed to augment her wedding album. But I'm okay at that stuff. But there's the good to great to world-class piece. And I'm just seeing whether it's done through, my primary thing is coaching, right? Which is observing, paying really close attention. Our mutual friend, Kay Scorer, past guest on the show, often calls herself the witch of noticing. Because she just notices. She's a brilliant coach and facilitator. But there's just that level of seeing what's really inside. And that's what I feel I observed in those photo shoots you've done for people.
Amazing.
The bit I'm blown away with, and it's sometimes anxiety can come from trying to rationalize stuff, at least in my more limited experience of anxiety, but real experience. But how on earth could you know when to click the shutter when you were the subject?
Oh, I've not been asked that before. So with my face-to-face shoot, I was still. So I was just pressing a little device. When I was doing my freedom shoot, I think because I was moving as well, and I was doing a breathing and movement thing. So there was a certain point in that process that I wanted to capture. And so that was about being in touch with my body and what I was doing and knowing when to press the button. But of course, because I was doing a lot of it with my toe, I kept missing. So there's a certain amount of frustration and perseverance that had to go on. And then also, I'm also aware of just to keep shooting, even when I'm not doing anything, because there is always magic there that we don't notice and we don't see. And particularly if I'm taking pictures of myself, that I have no idea what's going on. I can't see how I can have an idea of what it looks like, but I don't actually know until I see it. So I suppose it's a bit of creating a boundary and then improvising within it and using my intuition. And I think I do that with my clients. That's about knowing the moments to take the pictures with my clients is directly related to how much I know myself and how in touch I am with my own nuances and my own emotions. And to see that, I suppose, when I see that reflected in my clients, or when I get to know them and what makes them tick, and creating that safe space that they can be who they are with me, and allowing them that space to be as well. So there's the intuition with the timing of taking the shot, and also giving them space just to be, and silence and quiet, and allowing things to just unfold naturally.
I had to get a pen and paper out there. That was me looking away in the noise in the background, because I've learned in my process that when I handwrite something, I remember it.
Do you?
Right, when I handwrite it, not if I type it. So with my clients, I take all of my notes, always handwritten.
Wow.
And I just throw them in a folder. And I always have that folder whenever I talk to them next. But I rarely ever have to refer to it because the recall's wrong. And you said, create boundaries, then improvise.
Yes, there's something, I love that juxtaposition of creating the safe space and having those boundaries, those ultimate boundaries, which then gives you the freedom to create, co-create. And I'm always fascinated in how the boundaries is, they're different with every person that I work with. They're not, and they are. I mean, it's so kind of nuanced and detailed, but then within that, then you just can let go because you're safe. And I know my client feels safe, and I feel safe with them as well. And then it's so much of a partnership and an alliance. It's a really beautiful process.
I'm listening, and I normally 100% listen, but only about 90% because I'm going, it's still, the phrase is still spinning around in my head: create boundaries, then improvise. And I feel bound to riff for a minute on this. And one of my early guests is a dear friend of mine, Chris Vanderkyle. So I think you're guest number 38 on the show, and it's on a roll. And he has done a lot of business. He's a businessman, right? And very, very creative. And one of the things he talked about with me was the role of a chief risk officer on a board of directors. And he says their role is, sometimes they think their role is to make sure people don't take risks. He says, actually, that's not their role at all. And I'm paraphrasing. Their role is to enable people to take risks.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? And he talked about education, and it said, no, what would you do to change education? He says, I would have the school inspectors measure the individual teachers and measure the schools on a metric of each teacher must take a career risk every year.
Nice.
All right. And the boundary piece is, he went on to say, is, look, these are professionals. They're never going to endanger the children physically, emotionally, mentally. But they need to do something that they might have in their mind that I'm not allowed to do this, I don't have permission to do this, etc. But actually you flip it the other way. It says we're never going to grow and learn and change if we don't do something a little bit stretchy, a little bit scary, a little bit risky. And
yeah.
he said, even quite powerful. It says, if it doesn't work, if it works, tell everybody and we learn from it. If it doesn't work, tell everybody what we learned from it.
Yeah.
Right.
See, I love that. I love doing what people think that I shouldn't, or one shouldn't do. So I like putting things together that shouldn't go together, or doing the opposite. Funnily enough, a bit like someone we know, doing the opposite of what we think we should do.
Do you do wonky stuff occasionally?
And I don't ever call it wonky. No, that's someone else's bag. But
we shall remain unnamed on the show. But a past guest whose initials are SC.
Yes, who lives over there.
He's in the global headquarters in the shed at the bottom of the garden.
Yes. Bless him. So I love that, and actually, it was Steve who planted that idea of doing the opposite of what we feel is the right thing to do, and removing those shoulds, and approaching with curiosity and wonder, that childlike wonder. I mean, what if? And I'm such a believer in having an idea and then working out how to do it. I'm not a can't person. I hate that. It just makes me want to do it more. So if someone says to me, don't do something, then I'll just go away and do it massively.
So I'm hugely visual. However, my métier is language, right? I write and I use language a lot. And I have a good friend called Travis Carson in Arizona. And he talks about people who should all over everybody.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
I have another friend in Leatherhead in Surrey, and he looks a bit like a nightclub bouncer, but that's a bit of a front, right? His name's Frank Bastow, and he wrote a book, and you just have to pronounce this, not in the posh accent I'm going to use, but in more of a sort of south of London accent. Don't be a can't. So Don't should all over people, and don't be a cunt.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, I'm going to use that in future conversation.
It's a cracking book if you ever want to pick it up on Amazon. Don't Be a Cunt by Frank Basto. Removing the shoulds, you said, and I think that's it's in all the talk that we have in the world around complete freedom. Everyone wants to be free, or people don't want COVID restrictions, etc. Creating boundaries, having freedom within boundaries, or enabling constraints and creative constraints, and all of these things, right? Are great. But I just particularly love your language. It takes it another level of freedom to say improvise, because you've got complete freedom to go anywhere within that safely created boundary, because you're the photographer. You're going to hold the subject. And know that it's complete, you've created that boundary in which they can completely improvise.
Yes.
I think that's really, really cool. And to do that in a form, there's all this talk about diversity, and to do that in a form of communication, which is not the reading, writing, arithmetic schooling that we all grew up with. And, there's a very good friend of Kay's that, is a dancer who's profoundly dyslexic, and she communicates her big thoughts through movement, and you know what, it works. And
actually, I mean, photography is the way that I make sense of my world, and it never ceases to amaze me, and it's always the thing I come back to. So if I'm stuck, then I'll take my camera out and go and photograph something. And I'm going to shoehorn in something that I'm doing now from that. Actually, is last year during the first lockdown, I made sense of it by taking my camera out, taking my macro lens out, and getting to know nature in a different way. And I'd take it out every day when I was taking the dog for a walk, and that really helped me make sense of what was going on, gave me something to focus on, gave me purpose during the lockdown. And I've launched something this month called What Now? And I'm basically asking people to make sense of how they're feeling now through photography. So I'm asking people what their what now is, what's important to them now, and why, and how they might express that through photography. From what I did last year and how much that made sense to me was to look at the world differently, or to express myself through photography. I experienced pandemic burnout a few weeks ago. That hit me really hard, and I brought myself back through photography and making sense of what I was feeling and what I needed. So I'm asking people now to think about, with everything that they've learned over the past year, what they've learned about themselves, and
just right now, as in
the community is yours is what next, mine's what now.
And I think I'll also just share that we both live in the UK, or let's be specific, England, because England has its own rules. And it's a year of this and all of those things. And a few weeks ago for me, February 27th was the last time I saw my sons, right? Last year, right? So that hit me, and then all of this. And so, the pandemic burnout hit me, and I suddenly felt terrible, right? Really down for a couple of days in a way I've not felt for years and years and years. And I thought, I had the self-awareness to know I need to do something. And it doesn't involve doing more of what I'm doing. So I don't normally do manual labor in the garden, but I went and bloody dug something and did some heavy lifting for about 3 hours. And that just, I could feel everything lifting, So I had that sort of depressed malaise where I didn't want to get off the sofa, and that helped. But I think I just wanted to share that, because there might be people listening going, yeah, I'm feeling that now, or I felt that a few weeks ago. And the phrase that came to me around the macros, there's a period of time the first month where we didn't even want to leave our own garden, right? So in macro lens, there might be some people who don't do photography, don't know that's a mega close-up lens, right? And so, you could see the world in a grain of sand in your own house or in your own garden and see it in a different aspect. And yeah, very cool. But the what now could be any kind of photography, right? So I think it's a very abundant thing you're doing. So I think that's really cool.
Absolutely. And I just, just interested in how people are feeling and how they might express that. And what does their what now look like? Mine is very much about space and stopping and noticing and macroing up, noticing the small stuff and be appreciating the little things to help me cope with the big things, getting that kind of balance. But I'm fascinated to find out what other people are looking to do when, and I love the question, because what now incorporates what has been, what's going on at the moment, and what we want for the future. It encompasses all those things. So I'm really excited to see what people will create.
It's very cool. And my work broadly, my professional work with clients is incredibly similar to what you're looking at. You have to, if you want people to really be brave and move forwards to whatever comes next, they need to have that boundary in which they can feel safe and then play and explore and look at different things. And one of the critical things I always talk to people about is, where are you now? How are you showing up? Right. If you're out in the future, and particularly if you're leading other people, it's, there's nowhere near as much power as if somebody shows up completely aligned within themselves and able to be fully and immersively present in every small moment.
That's what I say to my clients, but not as eloquently as that. I ask them to come as they are, and without expectation of who they feel they should be on that day. I have no expectation of how they're going to be, because however they are, we'll work with that. And I think we don't offer that opportunity for people. We don't say, just bring yourself. Whatever's going on for you is good and is welcome and is valid, and I want it here. And because people always stick a different hat on, don't they? Or think, well, I'm going here, I should dress like this or be like this. And actually, no, we do away all of that, all of what society says we should be, and let's just step into who we are.
Amazing process. And there is a concept called the mask game, which is really well developed. I've just realized that your husband does something called that, or did. Not the same thing. No. His is a very cool process, but this is like a multi-day immersive, lots of tears before bedtime kind of process, because we do all wear masks all the time.
Yeah.
And the ability to shed them in front of a photographer with a lens there to capture whatever is present is very, very powerful. So
it's always such an honor, when people, my job is to make my clients feel safe to do that. And when they do, it's such an honor to be able to see people drop their guard and be who they are, be real, and there's often tears and, big emotions going on that they don't often have the opportunity to express.
Before we close, I've been bursting to pop out an idea, which is to do both shoots back to back on the same day.
I think that's a lot to ask a client. It's a lot to ask a client.
Just an idea that I was having, mulling over what would the energetic state shift need to be for that to feel valuable and authentic. And it might, you're right, it can be very, very...
I think the energetic shift is a good night's sleep. If somebody came to me and said, I want to do both on one day, I'd go, no. Really, no. I think that's knowing the process like I do, and how it works and how powerful it is, and the space that I create for my clients, that I ask them to go into within themselves. I mean, they don't express anything that they aren't ready to, but it's an exhausting process. Both of them are exhausting for different reasons.
I was improvising within the boundaries.
I mean, you've really got me thinking about, I mean, you know, there was me going no, and actually, you know, perhaps I should spin that around and think about how could I do that, or how could I do something similar. I do something that starts with photographing your inner critic in the morning, and then doing a freedom shoot in the afternoon. And I've done it with one lady, and that was incredible. That's doable, but I think face to face.
It's so much deeper, yeah. We're playing, we're improvising.
But I wonder what that might look like.
Yeah, that was all. So I want to honor your time. And we talked for half an hour, and it's been really amazing. I do write every day, so I will be writing a blog called Create Boundaries and Improvise very soon.
Amazing.
And I write to develop my thoughts, so I don't actually know what I'm going to write, other than I will be saying it's inspired by talking to you.
Oh, thank you.
Where can we find you? And then I will allow you to have the final word.
So you can find me Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook at Kathryn Chapman Photography.
And that's Kathryn Chapman.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
What's your closing thought from this space we created and improvised in?
My closing thought is, what now?
Perfect. It's been an absolute pleasure, Kathryn. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Cheers.